Yo, what is going on, boys? This is Flip, and today I'm going to be covering my round 4 game in the Bloomington Open against a unrated opponent. And this guy had already drawn like a pretty strong opponent in his round 2 game that I had seen before my round 2 game, so I wasn't feeling a lot of confidence, we'll say. I was feeling pretty anxious as always before this game, but I decided to just come to the board and try to have an open mind and play something that I'm comfortable in. So he started out with d4. I opened with knight f6, c4, and I've played a lot of things in um this line. I've played e6, I've played g6, I've played knight c6 in online games, but I decided to go with what I had studied the most over time, and that was g6. And after knight f3, I would play bishop g7, but he, of course, goes knight c3. And instead of going for bishop g7, the king's Indian, I decided to go for d5, the Grunfeld. And I was figuring we were going to enter some main lines with cd5, knight d5, and e4. These lines here with like bishop g7, and then like knight f3, c5, and rook b1. This is like one of the most challenging variations against the Grunfeld. I figured we were going to get into a very theoretical opening and that I was just going to end up losing again. But luckily for me, he didn't go into anything too challenging because I haven't looked at this stuff in quite a few months. I still remember a little bit of it, but I'm going to have to brush up on that, obviously. But he opened with knight f3 instead of going into all that, which I was happy to see. So after bishop g7, he took on d5. Um, I was kind of confused. I didn't understand really why you would take on d5 now after putting your knight on f3. Why not just do it a move ago? But after I took back, he didn't even play e4 and like transpose back into the main lines. He decided to go for g3, which, I mean, it's not necessarily like it's terrible, but you kind of like throw away your advantage as soon as you don't play e4 here. So I decided to take on c3. I figured it can't be bad. I knew knight b6 was another move. I knew castles was a move here, but I decided to just take on c3. It's like the simplest move. Um, bc3, c5, bishop g2, knight c6, just putting more pressure on d4. You'll see my pawn, my bishop, my knight, and queen are all lined up against d4. That's the main thing I like about the Grunfeld. You get a lot of early pressure against the center. He played bishop b2, which I saw this coming. This is the move that I had calculated. And here I figured that I shouldn't take on d4. I didn't really want a castle. So I played queen b6 here. This was what I looked at. And I figured, okay, I am attacking his bishop. He has to do something about that. I saw that if he played rook b1, I was going to play bishop f5. I figured that that should just be winning for me. So I here thought the best move would be queen d2. That's the move that I looked at. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to play after queen d2. I was probably just going to take on d4 and then castle and go from there. Um, but I figured he was going to play queen d2. He surprised me, played queen b3. And okay, I mean, this shouldn't be too big of a deal. We're just going to end up trading queens. I take on d4, and this forces the queen trade to happen on my turn, or on my terms, rather. Because if he doesn't trade queens now, then I'm just going to win his pawn on d4 after some trades. So he takes my queen, a takes, and then he takes back with the knight, which is arguably the trickiest move, because if he were to just take back with the pawn, I mean, I figured taking with the pawn was the best move because when you take back with the knight, sure, it allows you to go for some tricks on c6, but you have this really big weakness on c3. And I technically only have like one weakness, and that's the b6 pawn, and he has two weaknesses already by move 12. So I figured that already this middle game should be fairly decent for me. If not, I should just be better. So I played bishop d7, realizing the threat on c6. He castles, I castle. Plays rook fd1, I match rook fd8. And he goes a5, or a4 here, which, I mean, I don't really understand the point of a4. Maybe he wants to play bishop a3, or like rook a3 at some point, or just allow the rook to move vertically. I'm not 100% sure what his idea behind a5 was, because there's no a4 or a4 a5 to undermine my pawn, because I would just capture. So I was pretty confused by this move. I thought that he should do something a little more useful. Nevertheless, I could have traded here and played against his d pawn, but I figured if I trade knights, then I allow him to connect his c pawn with his e pawn. So I decided to not allow him to trade like at all, and I decided to play knight a5, which I had ideas of hopping into c4, and I'm also defending my b7 pawn. So I figured knight a5 should be a pretty good move, and here he played bishop d5, and in the game, I was almost 100% sure this was a blunder, and it is a blunder, but I just didn't calculate one more move. If I would have calculated one more move deep, I would have won right here and right now on move 16. But I saw bishop a4, discovered attacking his bishop, bishop f7, king f7, rook a4, and I didn't see what to do here after rook a4. But once I looked at it after the game, like immediately after I looked at it with the game, did not turn on the engine, anything. As soon as I got to this position, I was like, oh my god, I just have e5. And he can't move his knight, or I take his rook, so I just win a piece. And my intuition told me that I should go for it, but because of how I had lost my my other two games, I decided to just remain solid. I wasn't 100% sure if it worked. And I just remained solid. I decided to play bishop e8. Just defending f7. And attacking his bishop. He played knight b5, which was what I had calculated. And after knight b5, I figured I should just go bishop c6. And then if he trades on c6, my idea was to I think trade rooks, like for example this. Oh, my internet is dying. Give me just a sec. Okay, it would appear my internet is done shitting itself. So I figured that if he took my bishop, we would like trade rooks, and I would kick his knight out. And I mean, his knight doesn't really have anywhere else to go except d4. So let's say knight d4. And I was probably just gonna go like rook d8 here, and I'm threatening c5. So I don't know, like rook d3. Say like c5 anyways. Knight comes all the way back, and then we get like this position. This looks pretty good. This was kind of like what I was looking at in the game pretty much. It's just something along these lines, like rook d8, rook d3, and I'd figure it out. But after bishop c6, he didn't take. Played bishop a2, which was another move that I had calculated. I just brought my rook to the c file to put pressure on his c pawn indirectly. He defends it, rook c1, bring my bishop back to e8. King g2, rook d7. And rook d7 was a multi-purpose idea. So the reason why I played rook d7 was to either A, if he didn't do anything, I was going to double up and take the d file. And if he decided to do what he did in the game and play rook d3, then I would have knight c4. Now, if I leave my rook on d8 here, and I try to just play knight c4, this is actually a blunder, because he will just trade rooks and then take my knight. So I decided to play rook d7 for that purpose. And after rook d7, he played rook d3. I got knight c4, attacking his bishop, which, if I'm allowed to take, would really weaken this pawn. I would have ideas. Let's say, I don't know, he plays just rook c2, right? I would be able to trade this rook, trade, trade, and then chop like this. And he has, again, two split weaknesses. My rook is active. My bishop has some ideas of discovered attack on his rook. This just seemed like a very good position to me. I'm up a pawn. This should be winning. So that was kind of my whole idea with knight c4. He doesn't allow me to take. He plays bishop a1. Bishop a1, I didn't really like. I thought he should probably either just take my rook right away on d7 and then trade on c4, or I thought that he should just straight up trade on c4 and then maybe either transpose or try to just stack and like figure it out. Just do something. But bishop a1, he's just a bit passive here, and he allows knight a5. And this maneuver with my knight is the main reason why I think he should have taken on d7 prior to this, because he takes on d7 now, which allows me to take on d7 with my knight. Then after bishop d5 hitting b7, I just put my knight on c5, and this is the perfect square for my knight. It defends my only large weakness that I have. His knight is now pressured. This pawn is pressured. My knight's just perfect on c5. And he has no way of removing it at this point in time. Now, rook d1 is a tricky move. Reason being, if you try to go rook d8 to win a piece, he just goes bishop f7 and you lose a rook. So I looked at it briefly, saw the trick in about 30 seconds, decided not to play rook d8. I instead decided to go for bishop c6 again, and he played c4. I thought he should just trade, and they would just play this end game and go from there. But he decided to play c4, and I actually missed an easier win here than what I did in the game. I figured I would just take on a4 because I won the pawn immediately, but after like post-analysis, taking his bishop and then taking like this, and then I don't remember the exact move here. It's probably just rook d8, hitting this, and there's no e4. So if you were to go here, probably just go e6, and there's no way to hold on to this pawn. I mean, d6 maybe? Okay, so e6 isn't the right way, but I remember seeing something along the lines of this and in my analysis. I have it in my notes somewhere. Don't remember the exact continuation, but this should have been easily winning. But what I played in the game, knight a4. Let me see. Taking on c6 should have been the move to hold, which if he took on c6 here, I wasn't going to take with the pawn. I was going to take with my rook, because if I take with my pawn here, there's really no reason for my rook to be on c8, you know? Like, if takes and then pawn takes, he goes knight a7, and then I just saw this was like a draw after this. And then, like, trade, and this should just be a draw. So, I didn't want to go for this. What I did was technically still a draw, I want to say, after knight a4 and he took. I should have just taken back with my king, and I had like -2 advantage or something like that, but I decided to take on d5 first, making him undefend his knight, and then take back. And after e4, I decided to play rook c2. Here I took it took probably about 5 minutes or so. Up until this point, I had been playing like relatively quickly. I spent most of my time around move 16 when he played bishop d5, and I had that bishop a4 tactic, but I just didn't see it all the way through. I spent quite a bit of time on move 19 and 20 after bishop e8 and rook d7. And then I spent about 10 minutes after he played rook d3 deciding whether or not knight c4 is the right plan, and it was. And up until this point, I've been playing very quickly after knight c4 because my opponent was sub 10 minutes. I had about a 20-minute advantage on the clock. So I decided to stay ahead on the clock and keep going. So after I took on g7, he played e4, and I took probably about 5 minutes deciding whether or not I should play rook c5, rook c4, or rook c2. I decided on rook c2, which I don't think was the right move. Yeah, like Engine wants me to play like f6 here, or like knight b2 or king f8. Don't care. Rook c2 seemed the most active, not allowing him to play f3 and defend his e4 pawn that way. I just wanted to play quick improving moves. Put my knight back on c5 with rook c4 to come, and hit e4 twice, but I saw that he would have knight d4 just blocking, so I didn't go for rook c4. Instead went for rook b2 first, trying to deflect his knight away so then I could play rook b4 and then take e4 for free or paralyze his rook. And he played knight d4. I played b5. He played king e3. I played b4, and at this point, this is just very cleanly winning. After f3 especially, f3 was a very big blunder. I just put the pawn up to b3. He went rook d2. I went rook a2. He went knight b5. I went knight a4, which originally I thought back here that b5 was a blunder, or no. Where did I think I blundered? I think I thought here that I blundered. I thought that he could just take, and I didn't see that I just had rook a3 at first. I would have seen it, but I didn't see it at first. I was very distraught. I thought I blundered, but rook d2, rook a2, knight b5, knight a4, rook d1, b2, and he resigned because I'm simply gonna play rook a1 and promote. And yeah, that was the end of the tournament. Since I got the bye round, I ended up getting 2 out of 4, and overall, it was I would say it was a successful first tournament. By the fourth game, my nerves were neutralized. I had gotten a nice nap, and overall, I would say I learned a lot, not just in terms of like chess itself, but also the psychological part of chess. And I realized that I should take more time because I was playing way too fast my first 2 games. And I was kind of like delaying playing moves that I know I should play, but I just decided not to play them, even though I knew I should play them. And yeah, we're going to play a lot better in this next tournament. I'm hoping to at least get the same result. If it's a 4-game tournament, I want to get 2 out of 4 with no buys. That would be ideal. If I can do better than that, great. If I do worse than that, oh well. It is what it is. Thank you guys for tuning into this recap. And yeah, hope you guys have a great day. Peace.
I am an anomaly, made you think of insidious. Got a monster inside of me, I'm talking an entity. Ask me what they meant to me, I say the lottery, cause nobody bothered me. I am a philosopher, something like Socrates. And when I shoot